And welcome to the Cardinals Nest 2.0. This is the show where we visit with student athlete alumni of St. Mary's University. We reminisce about their playing days and also get caught up with what they're doing now. I'm the faculty athletics representative for St. Mary's, Dean Beckman. My co-host on Cardinals Nest 2.0 is our sports information director, Donny Nadeau. And today we welcome to the show 1975 St. Mary's graduate Marc Weisenburger. Marc, thank you so much for being on Cardinals Nest 2.0.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
And Donny, Marc, it was kind of your idea to bring Marc onto the program. 1975, he was an accounting major when he was here at St. Mary's. Baseball player, should point that out as well. So, Donny, kind of talk about your knowledge of Marc and why you wanted to make sure we got him on Cardinals Nest here.
Well, I think one of the things, Dean, one of the things that I've found with when we do the 2.0s is it's always great to have baseball people on because they have such wonderful stories to tell. And you know, I know about a month ago we had Bob Beeble on. Bob was a 79 graduate baseball player, talks so highly of the baseball program. And I know Marc has been integral with our baseball program really for as long as I can remember. And you know, I know that St. Mary's was very important to him, was very special to him. And I really wanted to have him on to kind of tell his story. I know it was funny, we were talking before he sent me an email. He says, well, I hope I can, I've never talked about the baseball program in 30 minutes. So it should be a fun half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it takes to do. But Marc, I really just wanted to talk about your experience at St. Mary's. And so the first thing I'd ask you to do is kind of hit the way back button and kind of tell us how you ended up at St. Mary's.
I went to a Catholic high school, Montini High School in Lombard, and had a passion for baseball. For some reason, St. Mary's had quite a recruiting process with Tony Piscatello, Ken Pellegrini, and I think there were 19 students from that little school in Montini that went to St. Mary's. I think that's the right number. But we had a plethora of students. And in January, we were coming to do a visit. It happened to be the winter, I think there was some sort of winter carnival planned. And we got here in January. We drove from Chicago in the back of there was like 8 of us came up. And we were in Rick Terrian's dad's van, and there were no seats in the van. There was no heat in the van. And we drove from Chicago to Winona, and we got to Winona, and they shut everything down because it was so cold. It was record cold weather, blowing snow. The whole winter carnival got stuffed. So all we did was could hang out in the dorms and hang out with the students that were now sequestered in their dorms. And you know what happens when people do that. Liquids start to flow, and us young kids just got kind of enamored with St. Mary's. And the group of us all went there. We went there, and it was Jim Izzo and Rick Terrian, myself. There was just Kenny Lindstrom. There were a whole bunch of guys that ended up being my classmates at St. Mary's that came from Montini. During that process, I got to go see Max and talk to Max that weekend and talk about my interest in playing baseball. And I wanted to play at the next level. I was an okay high school player. And I asked Max if it was okay if I came and tried to play on his team. And he invited me to play and was interested in following me. He had never seen me play, didn't know who I was when I walked in his door and sat and chatted with him. And you know how Nick comes and sits in your office, Donny? Well, I used to do that with Max. I would go in his office and sit and talk. The next 4 years passed quickly, but my feeling that his door was always open and I could talk about all sorts of things that weren't baseball related, certainly baseball related. He was trying to make me better as a person, trying to make me better as a player, and would always tell me to move my feet in his language. Weisenburger, you got to move your feet to be better. So he took me on the racquetball courts and thumped me thoroughly as a freshman. The scores were like 21-3, 21-2. My tongue was hanging out, and here's this 61-year-old man playing racquetball and not breaking a sweat, having this 19-year-old guy run around like crazy trying to chase all his shots. And again, the learning lesson was to be a better athlete, to try to compete. It took a little while, and it took a while to beat him, a couple of years to beat him. But we used to play racquetball together. We forged a relationship that was, in my view, very special. More like certainly a coach and a player, but he was mentoring me at the same time. He was mentoring me as a grandfather. Both my grandfathers had passed away, so I didn't really have a grandpa. So I looked at Max maybe a little bit differently than most people did. And, it just developed, that whole process developed from 1975. Getting out on the field, being able to compete. Charlie Richards had been the predecessor. Charlie was an amazing catcher for 4 years at St. Mary's, and I followed that next 4 years catching for Max in those 4 years. So for 8 years, I think Max ended up with some pretty good backstoppers behind home plate. So it was kind of a legacy thing. And, Max telling me that, catchers were really important. They ran the game. They were his eyes and ears on the field. And that's how I built the relationship with him. So fundamentally, it went from telling me that he was going to give me a chance to really developing a special relationship with the man.
Mark, can you talk a little bit? Baseball doesn't change. The game of baseball is the same today as it was back when you played, but especially for a catcher, did you call the game yourself? I know now, Nick and TJ do the calling of pitches and whatnot. Did you call the game back when you played?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was also part of the arguments that Max and I would have when he was telling me that, I should have called a fastball or I should have called a curveball. It's when I called a wrong pitch and it worked out, I never heard boo. When I called the wrong pitch and the guy laced a double to knock in 2 runs, then I heard about it. So it was always about the result, not necessarily the thought process. But we had a really good pitching staff through my 4 years. Mark McCarroll, who I personally think should be in the Hall of Fame, the St. Mary's Hall of Fame. Bobby Cerrone was there. Jerry Hoffman was there, who was in the Hall of Fame. Larry Hogan, Jeff Black. We had some really good pitchers during that 4-year stint. We had our Tuesday and Saturday guys for conference play were dominant. They were really quite incredible when you throw Mark McCarroll as a left-hander and Jerry Hoffman out on the mound. We were really disappointed we didn't win conference my junior and senior years because of the dominance of our pitching staff.
Mark, maybe talk about your relationship with some of the other players on the team as well. I know you and others had an affection for calling each other nicknames as well. Yours was Pudge, correct?
Yeah. That came about from, my teammates were really the whole concept of Pudge's Place came around the fact that our favorite spot to be was in the locker room. We got there early. We hung around together. We stayed together late. We'd run up and get food together. But that really was our safe haven. When you walked inside that door underneath the center, underneath the student center, when you walked in there, that was kind of a special place for us. It was a special place for me. And so we kind of created Pudge's Place around that idea. But how Pudge came around was Dan Del Favo was a senior. He was a senior pitcher when I was a freshman. And Max bought these pinstripe tight polyester uniforms, which were, if you look in history, all the uniforms up to that point in time were these thick wool, baggy, looked like they were 1950s kinds of uniforms. And all of a sudden, we're starting to look like the 1979 Pirates, with colors and tight knit uniforms. So in my freshman year, Max bought these tight pinstripes. Well, my pants didn't quite fit very well. And you get what you get and you put them on. And Delfava thought that I looked a little pudgy in my pants, and that nickname stuck. It effectively stuck forever because nobody knows me as my real name. They don't know me as Mark. Everybody at St. Mary's called me Pudge. No matter if I knew them or not, they knew me as Pudge. And my teachers would call me Pudge. I mean, Dennis Daly called me Pudge. Max started calling me Pudge, and he never called anybody by their nickname. And so I have a written note from him, Donny, that he sent to me that I have recently moved to Arizona and have my permanent home now in Arizona. And I ran through a whole bunch of stuff, and I found a handwritten note from him entitled at the top, Pudgy, P-U-D-G-Y. It didn't even have an E-Y, but that's what Max, that's how Max started the letter, is Pudgy. And that's kind of the way it was back then. It just became, and there was a couple people, certainly a catcher that was pretty dominant that used to be called Pudge too, and his name was Carlton Fisk. Not that I could hold that or stand up to that, but I think that's also how it kind of came about. That was the right era of time when Carlton Fisk was dominating the American League with the Red Sox and the White Sox.
One of the things, Mark, that has always struck me is, as an alum of St. Mary's, having been there now for 25 years, I know why St. Mary's is special to me. I guess I'd like you to kind of tell us, or tell everybody, what is it about St. Mary's that made it so special to you?
Well, I left my boyhood home as a boy. I felt maturity-wise, being able to be held accountable for what I did, and kind of, my mom didn't want me to go to St. Mary's at all. It was way too far away. I had an older sister at the time. She's 15 months older than me. She went to St. Francis in Joliet. That was comfortable because it was 35 miles from my house. And there I was in Lombard, going to go some 300 miles away from the Nest. And I really wasn't ready to do that, but I felt like that was the most important thing for me to do. So I leaned on St. Mary's community to grow inside and out, to take the fundamentals that I learned from my parents and try to develop myself into a man. And so my transition between my freshman year and my senior year, the accountabilities, the responsibilities, having somebody help me guide me with my ethics and morals. I had good foundations, but the 70s challenged you, because that was the era of free thinking and people going against establishments and wanting to wear their hair long. That's another Marxism, is that all of us wore very short hair. Donny, you would have had to get a haircut even with your crop. Everybody wore short hair. In fact, I sent a picture around to Bobby Cerrone. There was a picture of Mark McCarroll, me, Bobby Cerrone, and Larry Hogan in the locker room. And by the way, our nameplates were a piece of tape stuck on the wall with our names written. Weisenburger was written on, that was our nameplate. That was what we had. And that picture, we were all laughing, and I sent it to Bob, and Bob's comment was, must have been toward the end of the year when we took that picture. And I sent back a text note, why was that, Bob? And he goes, well, look at how long our hair is. certainly wasn't the beginning of the year haircut. It had to be, you know, as your hair got longer, you started to put it behind your ears, and, you know, Max didn't want anything touching your ears, and your hair couldn't flip up in the back if your hat was on. So, you know, it was short hair, and that was that. So that picture kind of confirms what we did. Bobby had to, he just hated the fact that he had to have short hair when everybody else wore long hair. You could tell the baseball players because you could see their ears. Nobody else on campus, you could see their ears.
Once again, we're talking with Marc Weisenburger, 1975 graduate of St. Mary's University and baseball student athlete. Marc, you talked about how special St. Mary's is, and it obviously was special to your family. And even today, you can always tell certain families how special it is because the siblings keep coming through the university as well. And I believe it was your brother Wally who was here just as you were graduating, correct? And then your brother Joe came shortly after that. So certainly there is a Weisenburger legacy here at St. Mary's.
Yeah, that was interesting. My brother followed me for 4 years. He was also a baseball player and played for Max, and as did my youngest brother, who also played for Max. My youngest brother was a catcher. Wally was an infielder. My youngest brother was on the last championship team that Max had. And I think he played 3 years. His senior year, he got mononucleosis, or got measles, and ended up having to sit out. Got it in an inopportune time and couldn't play his senior year. But I believe his junior year was the last year Max had a championship team. And we were down there talking about the Max program that we started. And my brother joined me. We rode motorcycles down there to Winona, which was really fun. Took a motorcycle trip down to Winona and spent a little time with the players that day to introduce the Max program. So for a mother who didn't want her firstborn son to go to St. Mary's because it was too far away, look what happened. She soon became, saw what it did for me, and soon became an advocate and a proponent of St. Mary's education. She became very close with my mom. My mom and Max communicated. They used to write letters together. Donny, you've seen the scrapbooks my mom put together for keeping track of history and keeping track of some of the details in which we traveled. So yeah, our family St. Mary's became a really important part of what our family was and how much my parents enjoyed going to Winona. Certainly not the first time. My mom cried all the way home, but you know, after that.
I think that, Marc, it's obvious how much that St. Mary's in general, but the baseball program in particular has meant to you. You mentioned Pudge's Place and the hand you had in creating what is arguably one of the greatest clubhouses that a Division III baseball program can have. And now you just mentioned the latest, the Max program. Can you talk a little bit first about Pudge's Place and how that kind of came about, and then we'll go back and we'll talk a little bit about the Max program as well.
Yeah, part of it comes from a theory of paying forward when you have the opportunity, which has been a fundamental in my life, is figuring out how to pay forward to the next generation. How can I help? Not unlike what Max did for me, he certainly did it through his spirit and who he was. But how do I get a chance to pay forward? In 2017, we had a company. I owned a company that I was CFO for, and I was also an owner in the company. And we had another company come and acquire us. And through that acquisition, I was blessed to take what I felt was a small investment into a return that was really quite unbelievable. And so I started to think about, as that process was happening in the summertime, I was talking to Nick about what I could do to change the course of what he felt he was lacking in terms of his ability to recruit a student athlete to St. Mary's. Where's the gaps? Where's the holes? What is going to make us different than every other MIAC school that Nick has to compete with? Competes with MIAC schools, but he also competes with University of Wisconsin lacrosse and all the other area schools. Well, how can we make a difference? What can we do? So we were kind of kicking around the idea of turfing the field. That's what the original thought was. And I drove up to St. John's on a cold Saturday and watched a doubleheader with St. Mary's. And we had St. Mary's always has a bunch of little guys that can play, and St. John's has these guys that fill out pants and look like they're football players, and they're huge. And, of course, they're playing on an extremely fast infield, and every ground ball seems to go through the infield, and we don't get a chance. We had a ground ball to short that bounced over our little shortstop's head. I mean, it just was frustrating me. I drove home. I told Nick, I will never support a turfed field. It just doesn't fit for me. Plus, it doesn't fit with the kind of person you recruit. I mean, you recruit quick kids that can play, field a ground ball, have got to get to it. We shouldn't be chasing balls off a wall. So not to say anything about what St. John's did negatively, because, somebody came up with a lot of money to put that whole program together from a facilities perspective. But playing on turf field, I think, is the right way to play baseball. To play on natural field, not turf field, but natural grass is the right way to play baseball. So we took that idea and started thinking about some way to create a workout program for the students, some, baseball tunnels. I mean, we started to think about all these ideas, and then we landed on a locker room. We landed on the idea of having a home for the players, someplace they can go to kind of reflect the same way what that little tape meant for me was that was my little spot in life. And that's where I found some peace, some great teammates, watching Tony Gilski do Max Moloch routines in the clubhouse, watching some of the things that happened in that clubhouse. And so that's how we kind of got to Pudge's Place. And I got to tell you, from start to finish, I was involved in doing the backstop program and raising a little money with Tony Piscatello to put the knee wall in and improve the dugouts and help with the screen and put in the new scoreboard. But that was almost a 2-year process by the time we were able to complete that. To go from idea to completion in 14 months was unheard of at St. Mary's. And you know how the process works, and I come from driving business results. It didn't seem fast for me, but it took 14 months, and that was warp speed for St. Mary's to get something done. So I was happy to be there to open that space with the boys. It was a euphoric feeling to walk through that door with 40 kids just gaga. It was really, I was in awe of what we were able to see and create. And it does accomplish what we started out to do. And Nick is starting to see the impact on recruiting when it comes to differentiating us from others. And having that place that means this is St. Mary's baseball. This is what it's about. Here's the culture. Here's the history. Building on the foundation that Max gave us for 43 years, and the others to follow, the other coaches to follow up to Nick, is to build on that foundation. So that's how Pudge's Places came around. And then Mark, I got to thinking about what else to do, and that's how we got off into the what's next.
And before we talk about what's next, the last question I had about Pudge's Place, and I know you are, from knowing you, you're not a person that wants to be in the forefront. You like working from behind. As you mentioned, I bet you very few people know about your impact with the scoreboard and the knee wall and everything. But I want to know from you is, what did it feel like? What did you feel like when they unveiled the Pudge's Place that is hanging on the wall there, permanently there? You walk in the locker room, there it is on the wall, Pudge's Place. What did that mean to you?
I mean, I had two feelings about it. um, it was very difficult to even get my name put up. That was a hard thing to do. I wanted to do it anonymously, but that was hard. And I talked to my kids about it. I talked to friends about it. They felt like it should have some recognition. So Pudge's Place is a term, an endearing term, to kind of feel like the Cheers of St. Mary's. You know, a place where everybody can go. If you remember the tune about the whole TV series, The Cheers, you know, that's a place everybody can feel comfortable. And so that's how Pudge's Place, and how I felt about it was, wow, did we get something done that's cool? And wow, we did it fast and you know, on time, and we did what we said we were going to do, and we accomplished so much. And you know, again, it's relates back to what Max did. I mean, we went on trips to Georgia with no budgets at all. I mean, Max had no budgets, and he would figure out how to get alums to pay dinners for us and stop in places like St. Louis. We had to play in St. Louis because we could go to, Paul Bear was a teammate of mine, and his family had a restaurant there, and we knew we could count on free food in St. Louis. I mean, that's just the way you do it. And so to kind of think about how we could do something to differentiate us, that's what helped us differentiate us back in the 70s and 80s. And we're trying to figure out how to repeat that today.
And if you could talk about this next project that you and Nick have got in the works and unveiled, what, about 3 weeks ago, the Max project. Can you talk a little bit about what that all encompasses? Because really, that is the next step. You've got a great locker room, and now this piece really is another benefit to those players.
So one of the things that happened when I showed up at St. Mary's is when, you know, Max said, well, you can come and try out. And that's all I needed was an ability to have somebody say, I'll give you an opportunity. When I showed up, you know, we had, albeit old, we had practice jerseys, we had practice pants. We didn't go out to the field if we weren't in a uniform. I didn't do that in high school. We wore sweatpants and our own stuff. I had shoes. Max gave me a glove. It didn't have a hinge. He gave me a glove that didn't have a hinge. And I didn't know how to catch with a glove without a hinge. And he said, Weisenburger, you do it with two hands. That's how you catch without a hinge. I couldn't catch without a hinge. So there's lots of things he gave us when we showed up that, you know, shoes, for instance. So I felt like we needed to do the same thing to, again, give ourselves a differentiator for St. Mary's, and differentiating us from a Gustavus or a St. John's or a St. Thomas. What's going to differentiate us? So I've, with Nick's help, and it was very creative on Nick's part, but we now have a player's package. It's called the Max Player Package. And you can look at the words the Max. We branded it to be the Max. But you can look at that a whole bunch of different ways. You can look about it being the Max for Max Moloch. You can look about it for the Max effort. You can look at it to say, well, it's the max contribution that you have to make to the program in order to get the award. So the Max brand is kind of a fun thing to do to help brand the baseball team, and brand it in a different way that we had been thinking about it before. So we came up with the player package is now called the Max. And what it is there's every kid was responsible to buy their own shoes, buy their own turf shoes. They have to buy their sweatpants and their jackets and their hoodies. And, you know, in today's world, that's now an expense for a kid to play Division III baseball. And so what we were thinking about is, how do we help those kids make the transition? So in the first year, the Max is everybody's going to get the same thing. All 4 years, they all get the same. They're all going to get the same thing. They're all going to get a new pair of shoes. They're all going to get sweatpants, a hoodie. They're going to get a backpack and a jacket, and they're all going to get the same thing. But as the program moves forward, the freshmen will get kind of the opening package, and sophomores will get a chance to pick different things. So we've set an amount of money that is available for every kid. It's about $350 per kid in retail value that we're paying for so they can play baseball. So when they show up, it's going to be like Christmas. They're going to show up with their locker room. They're going to show up with all their gear. It's right after Christmas. It's when they walk in that locker room, it's going to be a special Christmas, a special baseball Christmas for them. And so, again, we thought about differentiators. What is going to make us different? And I think the Max, when I introduced it to the kids, they were like, okay. And then they started to think about it. And I got 50 thank you notes, handwritten thank you notes from the kids. And what struck me was not only the appreciation of the impact on the culture, which is what the intended result was for me, but how these kids felt like I had helped them financially. And some of these kids, excuse me, one wrote that he was having struggles with his car. His girlfriend wanted to go out more. He didn't have any money. And he didn't know if he was going to be able to buy a new pair of shoes this year because he didn't know where he was going to get the money. And this to him was a special treat that he knew he was going to have new shoes this year for this year's baseball team. So I just feel like it launched itself into a whole different direction, you know, certainly unintended for me, but yeah, that part of the Max, branding something that's cool, coming up with an idea that maybe other sports teams can think about, right? The hockey team, the girls softball team, others can think about ways to fund. How do we help fund the program that we really enjoyed? And that's what the Max was about.
Mark, I just have a couple of questions, and then I'll turn it over to Donny for one final question. But one that I have has to do with your accounting degree here at St. Mary's. You graduated in 1975. How did your academic life help prepare you for your successful business career?
Well, it dates back to my conversation after my freshman year with Dr. Louis Gillieu. I wanted to be a math major and a baseball coach. That's what I wanted to be. And Dr. Gillieu had a conversation with me after my freshman year saying, you know, I really don't think this math stuff is going to work for you. You're not really very good at it. And, you know, he was bold enough to tell me that I needed to follow a different direction. My dad was in accounting. I didn't know anything about it. I really didn't have much interest in it. So I just kind of fell over into it. And Dennis Daly was magnificent in formulating my accounting degree and getting me through St. Mary's with a foundation. He also was encouraging me, and I had to have an internship. We had a terrific internship program at St. Mary's where we could intern with the big 8 firms at the time. And we did interviews. I wasn't going to interview, and Dennis felt like I needed to. And I interviewed and ended up with an offer from what was then Pete Marwick and now is KPMG and the largest CPA firm in the world. And I got an opportunity to do that from what Dennis was telling me. And I took that internship and melded it into an accounting degree. I never felt like I was an accountant per se, because I always wanted to be a leader. And so I used my accounting background and the leadership skills that Matt taught me to be my foundation in life. So it's really more about, you know, I learned as much about running a business, being a baseball coach, because I coached all my life, as being a baseball coach and helping grow young people. I took those same fundamentals and applied them to my business career. So, I've been a CFO. I started my own business in 1999. I was a CFO for hire. I ended up being a CFO for 7 companies at the same time at the peak of it. In 1960, I decided when I turned 60, which was 7 years ago, I decided to start unpacking my bags and figuring out how I could slow myself down a little bit to have one client by the time I was 65. And I still have that. It wasn't the client that I'd picked when I was 60, because that company actually ended up being sold, which was the foundation for Pudge's Place. But I still have one client that I still do some work for. And it's about the foundation, about the leadership foundation that I learned at St. Mary's, that I could take those skills and apply them to the business world. So my leadership that came from my relationship with Max and how I saw life was really fundamental in my accounting degree. And I used my accounting degree to, that was a discipline. It wasn't I don't like to take big piles over here and put them over here. That's not my style. That's not my desire. But to get people to be better at what they do, it gave me a position inside a company to allow that to happen. And that's where my impact was.
And then, Mark, my last question, and then I'll turn it over to Donny. I know you said that other than your nickname, you really didn't think you could compare yourself to Carlton Fisk. However, I do have your stats here in front of me from your 4 years at St. Mary's. And I have to say, they are impressive because every year your batting average got a little bit better. And I know defensively you were a very good catcher. 1974, you batted 42, and then in 75 you batted 329. You've got about 3 home runs to your career every year. You had double-digit RBIs, so you were a pretty good baseball player. And then, so how did you take that kind of continual improvement that you made here at St. Mary's and kind of apply that to your baseball coaching career?
Well, I wanted to play professionally when I left. Max and I talked about that, and I actually negotiated a deal with Pete Marwick at the time that they were going to hold my position open for 2 years in case I got drafted. Back then, there were guys getting drafted in the 65 rounds of drafts back when I was involved. I didn't get drafted. And then Max was going to have me, he had good relationships with the Pirates and the White Sox, and he was going to call them to see if I couldn't catch on. And then there were a lot more minor league teams. And I thought, I have this job with KPMG, and I kind of feel like maybe it's not the right thing to do. So I decided that summer that I didn't want to play professionally. I didn't want to chase around in the minor leagues. I still kind of kicked myself a little bit for not at least trying. But I started, at that point, I started to say, these 4 years, what am I going to do? If you think about how we started this is, how am I going to pay forward? So what I decided to do is to use coaching to pay forward. So I've always been invested in coaching young kids. I've coached them since I graduated in 1975. I've coached kids from 6 years old up to 18 years old. I've taken kids to national tournaments. I've taken my own sons. I have had 2 sons that played baseball and a daughter that played soccer. My 2 sons, we took their teams to national tournaments. We went to Cooperstown with them. We went to the College World Series with them. We went to where the Mecca is, that's Wrigley Field, and watched Mark Pryor pitch. Got to see him pitch in his last game. That's the day he fell on his shoulder and hurt himself for kind of his entire life. Ruined his career because he was in a rundown and tripped and fell. So we got to see lots of things with that and got to experience that. So I kind of parlayed that whole pay forward idea into one of my hobbies was coaching. Guys hunt, they fish. My hobby was to coach baseball kids, and that was my passion. Remember, I wanted to be a math teacher and a coach when I started. I got to do the coaching stuff. It's just the math thing just never. Thank you, Dr. Gilliu, for telling me to go get lost in that process. It kind of changed my life and my direction.
Well, Mark, the final question. I'm gonna put you on the spot and make you do some. Max is always going to be a part of St. Mary's baseball, no doubt about it, and it's obvious how much he meant to you. So what you're going to do is you're going to do your best Max imitation, advice to Coach Winicky moving forward with the baseball program.
My best Max impression? Well, Donnie, I don't know if you've seen this picture, but I ran into it. I'll send it to you. But I ran into a picture where I'm sitting on the bench and he's scolding me with his finger, and I'm kind of waving him away like, okay, I've heard enough. I think that's what Coach Winicky feels about me is, Mark, I've heard enough. Stop telling me that I need to win a championship. So in my very best goodbye, it's, Winicky, what the hell you doing out there? You got to fit the fundamentals down good. Come on, we've got to be able to steal that base, for crying out loud. So, Mr. Winicky, Coach Winicky, let's win some championships, because that's what it's all about. That's what we felt when we were playing there. So, get her done, Nick.
Hey.
All right. Thank you very much, Marc Weisenburger. Thank you for not only being on the program, but of course being now a lifelong friend to St. Mary's University and its baseball program.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time and be able to talk about what St. Mary's meant to me.
All right. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching Cardinals Nest 2.0.